begin to make this a live feed, I wanted to let you know that this is going to be live streamed. And so what we do here will not only benefit us, but hopefully people will understand how serious we are about women and women's health issues, and making sure that despite the lack of movement of some of these pieces of legislation in our House, in the Senate, that we are very, very clear that women's health issues are important, and I think with our continued efforts, we will be able to see the kinds of progress that we all came here to see. I know that we've been joined by our leader, Senator Sampson. So, Senator, we've just begun, so if you wouldn't mind saying a few words, and because we're live streaming, everyone who's testifying, I will remind to please speak into the microphone. Okay, Senator Sampson, thank you again, Senator, for your leadership on everything, and certainly in terms of women's health issues.
I want to thank you very much, Senator Cousins, and all my colleagues, Senator Stewart-Cousins and Senator Huntley, and to all the women in our conference. This is a vitally important issue. You know, I'm tired of hearing the rhetoric about women and their issues, and the bottom line is this. This is a priority issue. Dealing with women's issues, there is a tremendous assault on women, and I mean an assault on women, throughout this country, throughout this state, and we need to put a stop to it. We need to confront these issues head on, and this is what our conference is doing. You know, a lot of people and a lot of elected officials talk a good game, how they're supportive of these issues. You know, now the time is, the proof is in the pudding. Let's put this legislation forward, let's vote on it, and you will see those who really, truly support your issues. The time is not yesterday, the time is now, because what we are doing is laying the groundwork. We are laying a defense upon the assault that women have been taking nationally. And this is where the buck stops here with us. And we intend to do all we have to do, pushing forth legislation, show you that we truly, truly support women's issues in all aspects. Because if you look at it, not that you are, women are over a little over 51% of the voting electorate, but the bread and butter issues that you are talking about that concern you are the family issues, and are instrumental to the family foundations and ensuring that there is truly a future for the family. So I want to thank my colleagues for their support, and I will be supporting this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson. And you will see that there'll be legislators that are coming in and out because it's an extremely busy legislative day. But I wanted to make sure that my colleagues who are here now have an opportunity, and certainly both of the women, Senator Stewart-Cousins, who's to my right, and Senator Huntley to my left, have pieces of legislation that have not seen the light of day. However, again, are very, very critical to women's health and the things that we'll be discussing here. So, Senator Stewart-Cousins, any opening remarks?
Yes, thank you first, Senator Stewart-Cousins, for bringing us together and acting as the catalyst behind these various pieces of legislation. Let me just echo what Senator Sampson said. I believe that there is a concerted war against women, and it exists in state capitals throughout the country, not just Albany, but you go to other states and you read about some of the things that are going on, and you become absolutely appalled, and you say, well, this could never happen in New York. And unfortunately, it could, or it can, and we have to make sure that it doesn't. There are two measures that I have introduced, among others, and they deal, one deals with co-payments for insurance purposes, and the other deals with the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act in Washington and the lack of confidentiality for the victims. these are issues that I've been involved with. I represent an immigrant community in Queens County, and I am sponsoring the legislation with Assemblymember Grace Meng to try to make sure that at least the undocumented people, the victims in New York State, are protected. So again, I thank Senator Stewart-Cousins and Senator Huntley and Senator Sampson, and we pledge to continue to work together on these important issues.
Thank you, Senator Stavisky. To my left, as I stated before, is Senator Huntley, and she also sponsors a bill, and I believe the bill that you sponsor is going to be the first issue that we're going to discuss today. Thank you for being here, sir. Senator Huntley.
Thank you for Okay, I would first like to thank Senator Cousins for this. I think women need this type of discussions. I think people see men, but a lot of times, like with the veterans, I have a large veteran population in my district, and I was always going, and most of the veterans were men. And I was at an event one day, and a young lady came up to me, and she says, well, what about the women veterans? No one talks about them. And we have serious issues. I've been in the military. I've had a lot of very bad experiences, and we need to talk about that. So I met with her, listened to her story, some of the things which I'm sure you'll hear later, and then I decided about this bill, which is very important. There are a lot of women, veterans, who just dramatized because of what they went through in the military. So that's why this bill was so important to me, and that's why we're having these discussions. So again, I want to thank my colleagues for this, and I'm sure that this is something we will continue to do for women, because women are also part of this world. Sometimes you don't know that, but we are. So we will continue to fight on behalf of women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Senator Huntley. We've been joined by Senator Montgomery. And Senator Montgomery is probably a role model to so many of us here because of her continued service for over 2 decades, certainly exemplifying what women are about and the need for more of us to be in the legislature. So that being said, we will begin with our first guest. We have with us Joanne Zanoni. Joanne is the representative from the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Joanne, if you would join us, please. We are expecting the service member who will also testify, but I'd like you to speak a little on what Senator Huntley just spoke about, the need for a very specific kind of care when it comes to our military personnel, and certainly our women military personnel.
Sure, thank you. My name is Joanne Zanoni, and I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault, otherwise known as NYSCASA. NYSCASA is a statewide coalition of community-based rape crisis programs that are certified by the New York State Department of Health to provide a wide range of free confidential services for victims of sexual assault. For 25 years, NYSCASA has advocated for the effective response to all people affected by sexual assault. We've done this by providing information, training, materials, and other resources to rape crisis programs, allied professionals, policymakers, media, and the general public. Strengthening veterans' access to sexual assault intervention services would certainly support our continued efforts to address the needs of all victims. Research indicates that the rates of sexual assault in the military are high, and that many factors make it difficult for victims to report while they are still serving in the military. For example, 60% of women have experienced military sexual trauma in the military reserves and the National Guard. Some estimate that as many as 80% of sexual assaults in the military go unreported. Rape in the military is much like rape in the family. It's where you live. It's not just where you work. These statistics might seem hard to believe, but it's important that we believe victims of sexual assault. If we fail to believe that such crimes are committed or that the perpetrators of those crimes are solely responsible, we will not offer an appropriate response or take effective action. The reactions of victims' social support networks and the responses of various systems with which victims commonly interact are often less than ideal, and they are a source of added trauma. Victims of sexual violence are at higher risk than non-victims for experiencing depression, anxiety, addiction, eating disorders, suicidality, and other mental health problems. However, effective resources are available to assist victims of sexual trauma. Studies have found that the services provided by rape crisis programs make a difference. Rape crisis programs provide victims of sexual assault with free, confidential services, including but not limited to 24-hour crisis hotlines, advocacy and accompaniment, information about options, referrals, and individual and group counseling. These services help to decrease the length of time that victims experience rape-related symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and strengthen their ability to regain control of their lives. Victims of sexual assault consistently want to be believed. They want access to confidential support. They want to be able to choose the options that best promote their recovery. These seem such small requests, and yet these requests are all too often denied or ignored. While there are efforts at the federal level to improve the response to sexual assault within the military, we should do our part at the state level, especially when simply providing information about existing resources can make the difference between our veterans getting or not getting help. The purpose of S6342 is to disseminate information at the Office of Mental Health and Department of Veterans Affairs websites about where veterans can seek treatment and counseling for military sexual trauma. In consideration of the many veterans living with military sexual trauma and the difference that appropriate services can make in the lives of sexual assault victims, ensuring that our veterans know about treatment options seems the very least we should do. Thank you for this opportunity to provide some testimony.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zanoni. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Ms. Zanoni?
Yeah, let me ask you. So, what can we do to, what can we do to bring this issue forward so they feel they have an opportunity, or they feel they have the protection that is necessary for them to bring something like this? Because it's just like you're saying, it's sort of like occurring within the family, but at some point in time, how do we get them comfortable enough where they can come outside of the family and express their concerns or express these violations that they're going through?
I think a number of things are helpful. One is just getting information out there about that this actually does happen, so people know that they're not alone, that they are believed. Our responses have to not be those that are victim blaming, because people, it's hard to come forward if you've been sexually assaulted. And so part of it is just setting the stage so that people are not afraid to come forward.
Right.
Victims do not want the world to know what happened to them, so confidential services are critical. If people are going to come forward for help, they need to know that there are options, and that they get to decide which options are best for them. So it's a number of things. Also, if we do not enforce consequences for the perpetration of these crimes, then a lot of victims will decide it's not worth coming forward. Trying to bring perpetrators to justice.
Right. Instead of making the victim the perpetrator.
Right. If we don't bring perpetrators to justice, then victims, the experience for them is just added trauma, and many decide it's not worth coming forward and taking steps.
I think that's a good point, because a lot of victims are concerned about the trauma and the way things are being conducted lately. The women are the ones who are the victims, but all of a sudden the tables have been turned on them.
Yes.
Thank you. Senator Huntley, you had a question.
Now, I just wanted to say, basically when women go into the military, they go for the same reason that men go, in terms of making rank. It's like if you work for a large corporation and you're raped and you need the job and everybody's looking, you're not going to say anything. And I think part of with the veterans, you're home. Like you said, you live with those people.
Yes.
24/7. And possibly the person that raped you or the persons that rape you, they could be your lieutenant, your whatever. So what do you say? And then on the other hand, a lot of times people say things, but then people don't believe them. Yes. I mean, I have seen cases where it turns out to be the woman's fault, and I think people say that, even in court cases,
Yes.
They're always trying to say, well, you had on a short dress, or you bent over, or you smiled at him, and I think the same thing basically goes on in the military. So that's why they're not coming forth to talk about it, and
Yes.
that's something we have to change.
Yes,
I don't know how, because when you live with people, it's very difficult to do that.
Right. Because absolutely trying to report this while in the military, there are lots of possible outcomes that could just be even more damaging to the woman who's already been victimized. It could have career implications, but also her safety, her daily safety, is dependent upon these people that she's surrounded by. Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult to come forward while still in the military.
Yes. Do you also see in the military is not like the workplace. There's a hierarchy. There's a totally different environment. And does this make it more difficult in terms of the victim pursuing justice? And what happens if the victim does decide to file a complaint within the military and their very structured existence?
Yes, I'm not an expert. Yes, that's all right. I'm not an expert about what happens in the military, but my understanding is that the structures in place can make it difficult for victims to come forward because, unlike other service providers or other reporting mechanisms that provide confidentiality, you really don't have that within the military. And so, also, those serving in the military who've been victimized might be told, you have to report in a certain way. You cannot share this with someone you consider a friend. So there are certainly structures in place that are not especially victim-friendly. And I know that there are efforts to try to improve that, but there's a long way to go. There really is.
I was just curious whether, in your estimation, there's been an increase in the number of sexual assaults over the past decade, or do you see a rise, or is it leveling off? And
I don't know whether there has been an increase in the number of assaults that have taken place within the military. My understanding is that there are certainly more reports.
Okay.
So it may be that people are feeling more able to come forward and report, and probably that will continue as policies and procedures and services improve.
So this particular piece of legislation that really asks for there to be discussion of this particular issue amongst the veterans administrations and certainly in New York State that someone should be able to go to their VA clinic or wherever and be able to say, look, I need this dealt with and get some referrals somewhere.
Yes.
Because right now that doesn't happen at all. I mean, it's just as though there's no problem. I mean,
which in some ways is very shocking to me. But yes, apparently that is the case, that referrals are not made to their free confidential services provided by rape crisis programs throughout New York State. And if services are needed that extend beyond what our programs would normally provide, then those programs give referrals. They provide information and referrals to other professionals who can address other needs.
well, what is it? Okay. Are there any other, we've been joined by Senator Liz Krueger, and just finishing the testimony, that's quite all right, of the executive director of the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and talking about the number of victims of sexual assault, and 60% being women in the military.
According to one report, that that was the number of female victims.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. Does anyone else wish to ask? Well, thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you, Mrs. Nunn. We've also been joined by Senator Rivera. Thank you, Senator.
Another honorary woman.
I was going to say, but we are live streaming, and
Oops.
I am amicable to a wig if you want to pull one.
yes,
I'm good.
you know, we have about a minute before our next guest comes, so if either of you wanted to make a statement, it would be fine. Senator Krueger.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Senator Stewart-Cousins, for hosting this, I guess, third in a row forum we're hearing on issues important to women in New York State. I apologize for being late. We had a finance committee meeting. That's why Senators Rivera and I were tardy. And I look forward to hearing from more of the testifiers.
Thank you very much. Senator Rivera, please speak into the mic because they won't.
I believe that my
Pick up
voice
the
is booming
sound.
enough that it will get there. No, but I'm very proud to be here this afternoon, and I'm very thankful for the leadership of all of the women in the state senate. I used to work for Andrea. She's now a colleague, and she's also been a very strong friend. We sit next to each other in the Senate, and when it comes to issues of women's health, women's reproductive rights, there's nobody stronger in the Senate. I'm very glad to be her friend and her ally, and an ally of all the women that are here, and the women across the state of New York. I'm very proud to talk about what we do as Democrats in our Democratic Conference and what we do to protect health of women all across the state. So I'm very proud to be here and join all of you.
Thank you thank you much, Senator Rivera. It is nice to have you as a colleague indeed. I am told that Ms. Cook is outside, and Senator Huntley, are you going to be able to check to see if she's there? Because otherwise we'll have to go on to the reproductive health segment. Thank you for your patience. Is she there?
Do you have a sign for me? Oh, I used it for a different hearing. I don't think they have it. Well,
But is
all right.
Is she
Don't worry.
outside? Is this her? I'm so sorry. I know you. Ms. Cook, I know you just walked in, and it's right on time, so don't worry about anything. But I'd like you to take your seat because we've had an opportunity to hear about what the New York State Coalition Against Sexual Assault has been doing in general terms. And I'll tell you, during this particular, especially last month, and we will go throughout the year, frankly, talking about veterans, talking about the needs of veterans, talking about employment needs, and the fact that we are so interested in making sure that people who are serving us all over the world come back and get the services that they need and the support that they need. That's what we are all dedicated to do here in the legislature. Senator Huntley is carrying a bill that was based largely on some of the input from people who had served in the military, who had, experienced sexual trauma. And I understand that you were one of those people, and I really do appreciate your coming to share your story, because it's not always easy, as Joanne had mentioned to us. It's just very, very difficult. So I just wanted you to have a moment to catch your breath, because I know it's not easy getting in this building sometimes. But if you wouldn't mind, we would love to hear from you and your story.
I wanted to make sure I knew what time it was. Good
Yes.
morning. I just prepared
morning.
something in writing, so I'm just going to read what I have.
That's fine.
I am 100% service-connected for PTSD. My disability rating was increased from 10% to 100%. An evaluation of 100% is assigned whenever there is an evidence of total occupational and social impairment due to such symptoms as gross impairment in thought processes, communication, persistent delusions, grossly inappropriate behavior, persistent danger of hurting self or others, intermittent ability to perform activities such as daily living. My PTSD came from sexual trauma I experienced in the military, the U.S. Army, sexual harassment, assault, and rape, which was inflicted upon me by my fellow male soldiers and superiors. Sometimes a platoon sergeant would sneak into the female's room at night and pleasure himself standing over you. I was beaten. I was humiliated. I was sexually abused. The gentleman would climb through, some of the soldiers would crawl through the vents. And as you're in your room undressing, you hear noises, but you wasn't sure what the noises were until we found out that they were watching the women soldiers undress in their room. How PTSD affected my life. I missed work on many occasions due to severe depression related to the PTSD. Panic attacks before leaving the house, rage, anger, startled responses, at least 3 attempts at suicide, pills, and cutting of my wrist. I was hospitalized at least 6 times for paralysis, either for the left side or the right side of my body, stroke-like symptoms. Trust issues, feelings of being detached, and loss of intimacy, tenderness, and sexuality, loss of a marriage, and loss of a job. The first sergeant would tell us dirty jokes. He would take us out to the field and separate the women from New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Philly. Have us pick up cigarette butts, which was a part of our job, but then he would try to fill you up. But there was nobody you can go to because they were superiors. They didn't believe you. Especially women from New York, they had a stigma attached to them automatically when you went in. And I know of a few women that I talked to that experienced sexual trauma, Mickey B. of Brooklyn, New York, was assaulted by her platoon sergeant. Gail G., sexually assaulted by her female drill sergeant. C. King, gang raped by fellow soldiers. Karen was sexually abused by her platoon sergeant. And Sabrina C. was sexually harassed by her superiors. It's left me not want to be around men. And as a woman, I desire companionship, but it's very hard for me to trust. And nightmares. I have major insomnia because I still, even to this day, and this happened in the 70s, I still see the gentleman coming into my room, pulling me out the room. And you can't talk about it with anybody. You can't talk about it with your family because they don't understand. And I also like to add, I was doing some more research because I'm going to write an editorial for my newspaper where I live at, that a lot of people say, why didn't you tell anybody? Why didn't you share it more? Again, because they don't believe you. And secondly, as African-American women, we were taught to be strong. You know, when the man was absent from the family, we had to bear the backbone of the family. And you don't say that you were sexually abused. You don't say that you're depressed. You don't say that you have these type of feelings because you had to be strong. And I also like to add that I'm no longer a victim, but I am a survivor.
Yes.
I am a survivor. I don't know what else you'd like me to say.
No. Thank you so much, because obviously you're not only a survivor, but you're an advocate.
Yes.
Who can explain what we're talking about here.
Yes.
And put a face to something that is really it's tragic. Do any of my colleagues have a question? Senator Montgomery, did you?
Appalled, really, very disturbed story, especially in light of the fact that it's so pervasive. And I'm just wondering if you have contact with current members who are still in the military, if this is something that still happens to the extent that it was happening when you were active in the military?
I don't have contact with current members of the military, but from my research, it's still happening because people don't talk about it. It's still happening. I don't believe it's ever going to go away, ever.
You say that the only ones that you would possibly be able to report to would be superiors of the women there. Is there any other way of your having access to someone, medical staff, psychological staff, that you could talk to, or is that not the case, not possible in the military?
When I was in, that wasn't possible. And again, if you want to finish your career, you keep your mouth shut. Most women that go in, especially now, is because they can get an education, and it's paycheck. As the economy is, people go into the military to take care of themselves. So once you're in and that happens, again, you kind of, hold yourself and don't tell anybody. You just kind of bear and grin it because you want to finish your career. When I left the Bronx, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to, as excuse the expression, leave the block and make a difference. There was no turning back no matter what happened. I was going to finish my time, no matter how short it was, and I only did 3 years. After 3 years, I was ready to get out. My friend in Georgia stayed her 22 years. Even though she was sexually harassed, she stayed her 22 years. But there's nobody you can really go to. Who are you going to tell? They don't want to believe you.
Senator Huntley,
I just want to comment. When you say there's no one to tell, I kind of compare that, and I mean, no pun intended when I say this, but to you hear people talk about the blue wall, where everybody, you can't trust anyone because everyone is so connected, and it's basically the same thing in the Army or any other part of the service. So that's what it is. People stick together.
Yes.
You tell one person, they tell another, and before you know it, then you have more issues, more problems.
Yes.
Because that's how it works.
Yes. I'd like to also add that I just lost my thought, but you were right with that, but I just lost my thought. I lost my thought. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate very much your coming and testifying this morning. And granted, we're the state of New York, and these are incidents happening in our military. And so, in fact, Senator Huntley has a bill here before us that would require the Department of Mental Health to play a role in ensuring that when women return, having gone through this type of situation, there's even a military term for it, MST, military sexual trauma, that we're providing the care and services needed by women returning home. But again, you're testifying that when you're in the military, basically there's an expectation that you not go and complain and report to anyone. And I just wanted to read into the record from Senator Huntley's bill memo that according to the Department of Veteran Affairs, in screening for military personnel seeking VA health care, 1 in 5 women in the military responded yes when they were screened for military sexual trauma. And according to the Pentagon's own statistics, nearly 1 in 3 women in the military is at risk for sexual assault, twice as many as in the general public. And so I want to, 1, thank you again for coming and testifying, but 2, to say for the record, you are not alone. This is happening to a frighteningly large number of women who are participating and volunteering for our military forces. And we as a state have an obligation to help you, but we also have an obligation to speak out to our federal colleagues and say, what are we doing? We have a military that is designed and intended to have men and women working side by side, and we put you in harm's way by definition of you're deciding to join the military, but I certainly never thought in harm's way meant in harm's way from other personnel of the U.S. military. And so clearly we have a great deal of work to do to ensure that what's happened to you, and apparently what happens statistically to an enormous number of women in the armed forces, doesn't go unheard, and that your voice doesn't go unheard, and that we do whatever we can to stop this from happening to other women.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I remember what I said. When I went to the military, my drill sergeant, and I said it at a conference one time, that he said that whatever you were here, whatever you think you came in for, that's not what you came in for. You were here for the men's sexual pleasure. That was my drill sergeant in basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. But when you're 22 years old, you kind of overlook that. You don't pay no attention. But then after you get through training, you realize what he said had a lot of truth to it. You were there for the men's sexual pleasure because they didn't want women in the military. The draft ended, and they allowed women to come in 1973, and it was open.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I wanted to offer one thought that occurs to me, in addition to Senator Huntley's legislation, and of course, we're the state, so we don't have jurisdiction, but certainly in the least, if there's this this issue and this problem that women have, I think it's extremely important that every woman that is in the military and that experiences these issues, somehow we might be able to assist in making sure they have direct contact with their Congress representative.
Yes.
Because I think that if they're not bombarded with, complaints and issues, they may not take it seriously as an issue that they should be working on. And I certainly hope that your advocacy and the advocacy of women, along with us here, could become more active in making sure that whatever you receive as part of your orientation going into the military, you should have access to direct contact information with your congressional and federal representatives, congressional and Senate. So that's something that, and I think we certainly would like to be able to do some of that, and maybe some of the stuff that we print, like, you know, the calendars or the birthday cards or whatever it is, other nonsense we're doing, we could print a piece that is directed specifically to women in general, but certainly women going into the military, that you should have that information at your fingertips. So I think we could think about doing something like that as a conference.
I just have one more comment. I remember about 4 years ago, another case similar to yours that that was referred to the congressman. And the reason I know it was because I'm the one that referred it. And what happened is it didn't end well, because see, what the congressman does, they investigate. When you send them a letter and you talk about your issues, they investigate. And when they investigate, they go to the same people, and I'm sure you know this, who are the ones that are part of this whole, you know, so, I mean, it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
The Good Old Boys Network?
Yes, because that's where it goes. And when the congressman got the information, he went to the higher up, and then the higher up went down, you know, and I don't want to sound like this cannot be solved, but there's just going to have to be another way to do it. I don't know if it's more public, make people aware. Sometime when people know, then people will decide, well, you know, everybody is on to this, we don't need to do this. I don't know. But there has to be a method where we can also keep the young women safe while it's being reported.
Yes.
Okay.
I think they should also have something in a recruiting station that let the women know who they can go to when they sign up at the recruiting station. Also, I think when they come home, we should have public service announcements on television. We have a lot of ads for non-smoking and Bloomberg taking away the sugar, soda. There should be more advertisement. Bloomberg is not in here, is he? But, you know, but more public service announcements on the trains, on the buses, where people can see, have access, something, so women could know as they're coming out. When I got out the military, I didn't want to tell anybody I was in the military. And people said, you should have been proud, but I also was ashamed because of what happened to me. But now I know I shouldn't have been ashamed. But you learn. I was young.
Well, I mean, part of this hearing, and again, a lot of what we're going to talk about today have multi-layers and multi-levels, and even, again, Senator Huntley's bill tries to connect the Veterans Affairs Services in terms of what we do here in the state,
Yes.
to whether it's to the website in terms of the federal government, and so that we become at least a nexus for information, for letting people know that this is indeed something that needs to be addressed, and also getting people more familiar with the fact that not only this does happen, it can happen, but the more we give sunlight to it, the more people are willing, like you, to be courageous in terms of speaking truth to power. We are able to do things. So we really appreciate it. I know you can't see the looks around the room as you told your story. And this frankly is, I think, an unforgettable moment for many of us. And again, you are to be commended for your bravery. I hope you have a strong network. Obviously, the coalition is there with you. But I do hope that you continue to have a strong network of support, because you indeed are worthy of it.
I'm still in counseling once a week.
Okay.
My therapist at the vet center. And I was fortunate because I worked for the Department of Labor, so I had access to all that information.
Right.
So I was very fortunate working with the DA and Department of Labor to find out what was the matter, because I didn't know what was wrong with me.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next panelist, Sabrina Schulman, with NARAL Pro Choice, and we'll be talking about the Reproductive Health Act. So, Tracy, would you like to join us? Tracy Brooks, who is the Executive Director of Family Planning Advocates. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing. We're going to talk about the Reproductive Health Act, but before we even do, we're going to let you talk about it, because part of why we all know how long this has been going on. We all know that New York is, touted as, should be, and must continue to be a leader in terms of women's rights. And we all understand that New York, frankly, was in the forefront in terms of providing reproductive choices to women prior to Roe v. Wade. So the Reproductive Health Act is basically a modernization of our reproductive health laws so that women can continue to be able to make their personal and private decisions with the assistance of their doctors, families, whomever it is they want. We have been fighting, as you know, to get these laws updated and really take our laws out of the penal code, frankly, and put into the health codes where most of us certainly who are supporting this legislation believe they belong. And I believe that if you were to speak to most people on the street, they would be shocked, frankly, to know that our laws regarding abortion are in the penal codes. I will stop it there because I know that you all have something to say. I don't know whether Liz would be dying to make a few comments before they speak. Probably.
I want to thank you both for coming. I'm delighted that you're here in this official hearing format to testify today on the Reproductive Health Act. Of course, some of us, the two of us, I'm not sure Dominic was able to join, were in a different forum last week with the bipartisan pro-choice legislative caucus having a variation conversation which was more to help educate us as legislators to how important this bill is that we get passed. And really, I'm delighted always to hear you come and testify because you're two of the most knowledgeable women in the state on this important issue. So thank you.
In addition to which, and I'm going to stop because you will start, but our forum last week was for our legislative staff and colleagues, and because this is for public consumption, and because there's been so much misinformation about this bill, we would want to have you really just, explain what it is from soup to nuts, and at least this way on a public forum, we are able to at least get the facts out. So, Sabrina, do you wish to?
I would love to.
Begin
Thank you.
First? Thank you.
And I just want to start by thanking both of you and all of your colleagues, those who are here today and even those who aren't, for bringing these issues to the forefront, always, but in particular this year. And I think the important context for this bill, which many people know and many people have seen, splashed in headlines across newspapers all over the country in the last year and a half, is that it's not an overstatement to say that there have been a staggering number of attacks on women's access to basic health care. In particular, in 2011 alone, just last year, states across the country, including New York, introduced over 1,100 bills with the sole aim of restricting or banning access to reproductive health care. And we're talking everything from abortion to contraception to basic cancer screenings. And on top of that, Congress voted 8 times last year on anti-choice measures to again restrict or ban access to reproductive health care. Considering the state of the economy, the state of jobs, and the educational system, it's unconscionable that this is what's happening and this is what's on the forefront of quite a few legislators' minds, both in DC and across the country. We really believe that New York, particularly this year, has a singular opportunity to prioritize women's health, to begin to turn the tide on these attacks, and to show the women of this state and frankly this country that this is not what we stand for, that we're going to protect women's basic rights, protect women's access to basic health care, and we're going to do something that should have been done long ago, since this bill, as the senator mentioned, has been around for a couple years now. New York has a history of leadership on this issue. As Senator Stewart-Cousins referred to, 3 years before Roe v. Wade, New York legalized abortion, and at the time it was a groundbreaking step for women's health. It drastically reduced maternal morbidity and mortality rates, and it meant that women could make their own personal private reproductive health care decisions, get safe medical care once those decisions have been made, and that the decision would sit with themselves, their family, their God, or whoever it is that's important in their life when they make these decisions. We also have a record of legislative intent that these issues are important in New York. New York has taken great steps since that original law was passed to protect and increase access to critical reproductive health care services like contraception and basic GYN care. And the bottom line is that the majority of New Yorkers support this. We've seen in poll after poll, and you know when you talk to New Yorkers on the ground, 7 out of 10 New Yorkers support the Reproductive Health Act and think it's important that the legislature proactively passes it. So what does this bill do? You know, there's a lot of hoopla about what this is. There's a lot of misinformation from all, a range of sectors about what this is, what this isn't. What this is at its core is a proactive affirmation of what that 1970 law was intended to do, which is to make sure that every woman in New York can make her own personal private health care decisions. And the critical addition that this bill would make is that the women who are having health issues, particularly later in pregnancy, would also be protected to make those decisions and be able to access health care. The other piece of this is that, again, as the senator mentioned, our abortion law sits in the criminal code. The 1970 law was a very groundbreaking solution done in an inelegant manner in our laws, in the sense that the laws were left in the criminal code. Well, nothing else in healthcare is regulated in the criminal code, and we know that it should be regulated in the health code. And those two key pieces together of what this bill would do, I think, are the most critical. You can only imagine a woman sitting in her doctor's office later in pregnancy with a very wanted pregnancy. They're picking names, they're planning the room, they're planning for a future, and being given devastating news that this pregnancy is not viable and they're not going to make it to term. So this woman is sitting there being given life-shattering news, and then the next breath is being told by her doctor that to get the abortion care she needs, she has to leave New York State. The problem with our law is this: we have a troubling gap. We have no allowance and no protections for those women who receive that devastating news later in pregnancy, and it's compounded by the fact that our law sits in the criminal code. So that doctor sitting across from her is also thinking in the back of their minds, I could be criminally prosecuted for even considering providing her that care here in New York. For very understandable reasons, those doctors are not providing that care. So this is a problem that we can fix. We can fix it easily. We can pass this common sense law. We know the vast majority of New Yorkers support it. We know that most people in this country believe that a woman should be able to make her own personal private health care decisions with her doctor, with her family, and the Reproductive Health Act will make sure that women in New York can do that. We're just on, with 40th anniversary of Roe v. Wade on the horizon, we know that New York's law is what the women of this state rely on, as we've seen what Congress and other states have done to target the protections of Roe over the last 40 years. So we look forward to continuing to work with our colleagues in Albany to make sure that this bill is passed and that it's passed soon, because those women who are sitting in their doctor's offices today, tomorrow, next week, receiving devastating news, should not be told that their only option, if they even have the option financially, is to leave the state. So thank you very much, and I will pass it over to my colleague.
Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Thank you. Sabrina did an outstanding job being very eloquent about what the bill does do. And what I'd like to spend some time talking about is the accusations of what the bill does and explain why that's not what the bill does. So there are many people who are concerned that by passing the Reproductive Health Act, in some way it would require all hospitals, whether they are from religious backgrounds or non-secular hospitals, to provide abortion services that may be against their own religious beliefs. The bill is very clear that it upholds all existing conscience clauses that are in the state and federal laws. And certainly there's nothing that the state legislature could do to override federal requirements. And the federal law is very clear on requiring conscience clauses for Catholic hospitals to not be required, or other hospitals that may have an issue with the full range of reproductive health care services. A state cannot impose that. That will not happen. Additionally, providers will not be penalized if they chose to exercise a conscience clause or be discriminated against by the state of New York. That would not be something that this bill could actually accomplish. There are folks who are concerned that New York State would no longer be able to regulate the abortion services. Again, the state would still hold all regulatory authority over all health care provisions, including abortion services, if we were to move our abortion care from the penal code to the public health law. And actually, it would probably provide a better, more streamlined way to provide regulation and guidance for medical providers. So once again, there would be no way that the state would be limited on regulating abortion care or services. What this does do is ensures that the full range of the Roe versus Wade decision, which included a health exception, which through the Supreme Court has been said to be required to be read into state laws, would in fact be very soundly and affirmatively stated in New York state laws. And why is it that we want that? Sabrina talked to you about how 7 out of 10 New Yorkers are supportive of this bill, and the reason they're supportive of it is they truly do believe that the provisions of Roe versus Wade are under attack in this country, and there might be change, and very likely would be change, if the Supreme Court were to look at it again, or that this particular Congress might take action that in fact would change access to the full range of reproductive health care services. And so what we want to ensure is that here in New York, medical providers can provide the care more fully, but certainly the care they provide today, tomorrow, regardless of what happens at the federal level. And it's a common sense provision that New Yorkers are asking for. It's very rare that we get an issue that on a federal level has divisive qualities like this, that you would get 70% approval. The bill is as popular as the governor. So it seems to be very clear where legislators should come down on it. We appreciate very much the support that we have of the Senate, in the Senate, and across the state on the bill, and we thank you for raising attention to it. This bill is timely. It's appropriate. It keeps New York State at the forefront of leading the way on women's health care, but it doesn't put us at the front. And no one should be confused to think that New York State would be the first to pass a bill such as this. There are already 6 other bills passed very similar to this across the state, and they were done years ago. So we're not doing anything that is extreme or overwhelming, but what we are doing is, in this climate, when women's health care is being used as a political tool, is saying in New York State, it is not about politics. It's about the health of the women and access to care, that we are going to ensure that we have modernized laws that are located in the public health law by taking a very common sense bill and moving it forward. And we're happy to answer any questions that you have with regard to the bill.
Thank you, Jen. Yes.
And I just, before you ask a question, just because I know you meant to say 6 other states around the country have passed equivalent
I'm sorry,
laws,
yes.
and you said around the state.
Oh, I'm
So I
sorry,
just
around
wanted
the
to-
country.
For the record, I know you knew, but I wanted to make sure we heard it right.
I appreciate that, Senator.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's quite all right. I just want to thank you for the work, both of you, in terms of you personally, but the organizations that you represent for so many years. The question that I have is a little bit, aside, that I keep wondering and having concerns about how do we get the next generation of women engaged and involved, and as well as women who, many of whom I represent, who are not part of the mainstream as it relates to access to health care, culturally, language-wise, and so forth. And I know that Planned Parenthood has a wonderful peer education component where they train young people. And each time I have an event and there's young people talking to other young people, it works so beautifully. This particular group is just wonderful. They are being groomed as leaders in terms of advocacy and for themselves as well as their peers. So I'm just wondering if you have some ideas for us as to what we need to be doing. Obviously, you know, I'm a huge fan of school-based health clinics. I think that we have to figure out a way to provide health access to reproductive health services for young people in particular. But in addition to that, we haven't done that either very well, but in addition to that, what do we need to be doing to make sure that we have the next generation or so of women who understand the importance of advocacy as you're doing it today?
Sure. There's an awful lot of work that family planning advocates and our Planned Parenthoods do is side by side, shoulder to shoulder with our coalition partners, NARAL Pro-Choice New York. Actually, ACOG is one of our great partners as well, and the NYCLU. But I will tell you, the attacks that have been occurring down in Washington have done a lot of this work, jump-started a lot of this work for us, because there certainly was a time where people felt very comfortable and confident that the access to reproductive health care was very sound and solid. In New York State, the brave members passed the bill 6 days after I was born. So 42 years is a generally time-tested provision. Roe versus Wade is coming up on its 40th anniversary, and this is the perfect time for us to be discussing the fact that there are people across the country, and many of them are elected in the United States Congress right now, who do believe that the progress that we've made around reproductive health care needs to be rolled back. So I would tell you the constant conversation that's happened in the dialogue has increased the amount that many advocates have been able to get out to the public to speak to. But I would like to caution folks that the next generation is not complicit, and they are engaged. They're engaged in ways that are different than what we're used to seeing. As opposed to maybe traveling to the Capitol, they love Twitter and Facebook, and they're very excited to be a part of it. And those means really are very active around reproductive health care. What the next generation would like to see is us to stop squabbling over sound policy that has been established and move forward in ensuring that education is available, that we can have sexuality education available in our schools from kindergarten through high school and beyond, that they have the ability to access that education in schools but also outside of school and basic community programs, so that they have the ability to access information that they need to make the best healthy decisions for themselves. This is not an attractive fight for people who believe that this shouldn't be a question of legislation. We need to settle this question and move forward on what we do not have, and that is a solid K-12 program for our students who are in school that is supported by community-based programs for our students who are out of school as well. Sabrina, did you want to add?
Sure. I want to echo a couple of things that Tracy said, and I'll embarrassingly divulge my age. I am part of that generation in many senses, and you know, I think that it's a different fight for them. Not only is their activism seen in different ways, but even the women for whom they don't consider themselves part of an official movement, I think they just look at these issues differently, because for them they've always been healthcare issues. It's not a rights issue. It's not something you march for. It's just something you expect when you go to the doctor. And frankly, I think the more we can keep talking about it that way and making it clear that this is a basic part of healthcare that women, young and old and in the middle, expect, the better off we're going to be. And I think the more we'll be able to reach communities for whom this isn't a march down the street with placards issue. It's just something they need to understand how to access, and maybe they need better access to, whether it's insurance coverage or just knowing where to go for contraception or GYN care or cancer screenings or abortion. And so I think it's very much talking to the communities who care about this issue but maybe don't talk about it the same way that we do as a formal movement about, how does this matter to them? What are the issues? Because in many cases it's about access. And it's about financial access and physical access, whether it's young people accessing information in schools or low-income women accessing affordable services in their communities that, services they can get to if they can't travel and have kids that they need to find care for, have, a job that's hard to maneuver around to get to a clinic. And so I think it's really about how we envision, and to link it back to the Reproductive Health Act for a moment, it's a very real change that needs to be done to move our laws from the criminal to the health code. But it's also, from a message and symbolic perspective, that's where this country has gone. It was established as a right in New York in 1970, the rest of the country in 1973, but people understand it as health care. And I think that's how we need to be sure we're talking about it, because I do think that we'll reach communities who get it. They just don't talk about it the way that we talk about it often. And I think that's really critical that we connect those dots.
I thank you for that, and I will just say I'm always worried when I don't hear from people on issues like this from my district. So and I'm not a Facebook person. I'm not I don't twit or whatever they call it, and so I'm not part of that conversation. But I do have a lot of interaction with especially young people in my district, and so they bring to me their issues because I really want to listen to them, and this is not what they talk about. And I just have a feeling it's not because they don't care, but it's because they have not been, brought into this conversation, this movement, and they really should be. So I thank you for that.
And I do thank you for your testimony as well. One of the things that was mentioned, I guess, Tracy, you were mentioning about the health exception. And both of these organizations are advocating for, obviously, the full range of reproductive health care for all the right reasons. But it's important that we also talk to the physicians and people who are really charged with health care. And to that end, we have Jennifer Lang, who is the legislative director for the American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, also known as ACOG. So thank you for being with us, Jennifer. And
thank you as well. ACOG represents 4,000 OBGYNs in New York and over 50,000 nationally. This year, ACOG on a national level has come out for choice issues like they've never come before. We are in almost every state's editorial combating some of the regressive reproductive health laws that have gone out throughout the state. So thank you for making Reproductive Health Act a priority in New York. We had our annual lobby day a few weeks ago, and I know that our physicians were up, and this was one of their priorities. They can speak passionately about this bill, and they do often. So thank you again for meeting with them a few weeks ago, as well as continuing with this fight. And I just have a statement that I'd like to read. Women's reproductive health is under siege. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists supports legislation which would protect a woman's private and personal decision about when and whether to have a child. The Reproductive Health Act, or RHA, modernizes and updates current New York law. RHA simply reaffirms New York State's commitment to protect and respect women's health and the right for women to make private reproductive health care decisions no matter what happens in the Supreme Court. In addition, RHA does nothing to change a woman's fundamental right to control her own reproductive health and ensures that she will be able to have an abortion if her health is endangered at any point in her pregnancy. RHA protects a woman's private and personal decision about when or whether to have a child, as stated previously. RHA modernizes and updates current New York state law. RHA treats the regulation of abortion as an issue of public health and medical practice instead of a criminal issue, and guarantees every woman the right to use or refuse contraceptives. RHA provides for a very narrow definition of fetal viability, so there is no confusion as to when an abortion can and cannot occur. In particular, RHA provides for a health exception in addition to the current life statutory exception. Therefore, this legislation would allow for an abortion to be performed at any time during the course of a pregnancy if such termination is necessary in order to protect the health of the mother. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists continues to affirm the legal rights of all women to obtain a safe and legal abortion and have access to reproductive health services. ACOG continues to support timely access to reproductive health services and medications, including daily contraceptives and emergency contraception. Our commitment to women's health means we're committed to providing our patients with needed medical care and accurate information. Across the nation, state governments are inserting themselves into patient-physician relationship with no insight or knowledge of specific situational details and no ability to resolve difficult human conditions. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists works tirelessly on both the state and federal level to combat ill-conceived legislation intended to erode women's reproductive rights. ACOG is an advocate for women's health and is committed to reversing this ominous trend. We maintain our position and decisions about individual medical care are best made between the patient and his or her physician. Lawmakers should not be taking it upon themselves to define, mandate, or prohibit medical procedures or to require doctors in any way, especially inaccurate information off a government script to their patients. Politicians should not be legislating the practice of medicine or the doctor-patient relationship. We all need to speak up and take action when legislators pretend they know what's best for women and their physicians. The American Congress of Obstetricians continues to support initiatives to assure that quality care is available to meet every woman's needs throughout her life and to guarantee a full array of clinical services are available without costly delays or the imposition of geographical, financial, attitudinal, or legal barriers. Obstetricians and gynecologists maintain the relationship with their patients throughout various stages of a woman's life, relationships based on trust and respect, where patients can share their intimate medical concerns without fear of retribution, and where the doctor and patient can develop an agreed-upon plan of care that meets the medical needs of the patient and is consistent with her values. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists will continue to support Reproductive Health Act legislation, which guarantees that every woman can make her own personal, private health care decision, of course, especially when her health is endangered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Kruger, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and testifying. So I guess this is mostly addressed to ACOG and to family planning advocates on behalf of the Planned Parenthood clinics. So we've heard discussion of how, and I know this well, the Reproductive Health Act is not a radical bill. It's an updating of the law of New York State. We've heard of all the concerns going on in Washington, D.C. that may leave states on their own to maneuver. And we've seen, as Sabrina testified, to the bills that are passing in states all over the country that are going the opposite direction, that are actually taking away women and their families' rights and protections. We're not Texas, but if we were Texas, what would be happening in the lives of family planning and OB-GYNs right now? Because I think it's important for people to understand what we could be facing.
Well, Texas is really what started ACOG being as vocal as they have been in the last year. And some of the legislation that is being drafted one of the most egregious is that physicians would be mandated to do the ultrasounds, have that conversation that's dictated that a legislator drafted for them. And also, OBGYNs in some states that the legislation has not passed would be able to not have to tell the woman or the patient if there is a fetal defect, if they had fear of abortion. So that is going against everything science and medical that our OBGYNs go through years and years of training in school for, to make sure that the patient and the woman has the most accurate evidence-based science information out there. And these laws would slowly erode that.
The other piece that, if we were Texas, that we would be seeing is the lack of access to the full range of reproductive health care and preventative health care services. Texas has passed laws and reduced funding that are devastating to women with regard to who they can access health care from, whether or not health care would be affordable. So we're talking about whether or not contraception is affordable for women. Title X is a national program that was instituted under the Nixon administration. It was bipartisan. It's one of the top 4 most successful national programs that we have to ensure access to preventative health care services and family planning. And in Texas, they have significantly limited certain trusted healthcare providers, such as Planned Parenthood, from accessing those dollars, which means their patients are unable to access healthcare on a sliding scale that was supported by the federal government. Also unable to take Medicaid as a health insurance product. So patients who are accessing healthcare out of Planned Parenthood wouldn't be able to use the health insurance that they have. And because of a lot of the cuts in funding, we're seeing a large number of providers no longer able to provide services in as many outlets as they have had in the past. So now women are having to travel significant distances to see and seek preventative healthcare services. And what we will see, and what we do know, is that unintended pregnancy will be on the rise. Women being able to use contraception for other medical concerns, fibroids, heavy periods, endometriosis, and the like, will not be able to access that medical care, and women will be, their fertility will be in jeopardy, let alone being able to use it when and whether they choose to. Whether or not they remain fertile will be called into question. We are shoulder to shoulder with ACOG as family planning providers in being utterly disappointed, borderlining disgusted with what we're seeing happening across the nation, and really, number one, politicizing basic health care, and then number two, really having legislators dictate to medical providers who have spent tens of years in training as to what would be an appropriate relationship with their patient.
Do you hear from your OB-GYN doctors, both around the country and even here in New York, even though we have better laws than many other states, how they're reacting to being told you have to provide certain kinds of procedures that you don't think are medically grounded, you can't tell women certain information about their own body and health, and I think even in 1 or 2 states, that absurd law that you have to tell women false information. I mean, what are the doctors saying about this?
Well, in previous years, these pieces of legislation, they weren't moving. They were in the legislature and legislatures around the states, and they'd get a little play here and there, but they weren't coming out as forcefully as they are now. Our doctors are rising up. We're asking governors to veto legislation. We're drafting letters. We're in the editorials. It's one of our number one priorities that before we were comfortable with what was going on a national level. But they're slowly eroding everything they can possibly think of, from provider care to structure of the facility to conversation that they're dictating. And ACOG is coming forward, and we're standing up and making a stand.
I mean, I'm editorializing, and I'm not a doctor, but when I read about certain states passing laws that say doctors have to tell me that my chances of getting breast cancer will increase if I make certain decisions about my reproductive health, and I'm screaming as I'm reading the piece, but that's not true.
Right. we're seeing medical evidence being dictated in legislation like never before, and that's not going on just in other states, it's going on in New York as well. When you start drafting legislation or law that dictates a conversation with a physician and his patient, you are ignoring history, and you're also ignoring future evidence-based science, and you're putting that doctor in a place of either going by the law of the land or going by the law of science, and that is something that's very scary to us.
Thank you.
We've been joined by Senator Ruth Hassel-Thompson. Thank you so much, Senator Hassel-Thompson. This panel, as you know, was discussing the Reproductive Health Act, and although we didn't talk about the other bills, we sort of did, because we talked about the need to be able to prevent unintended pregnancies. And Senator Kruger, you have a bill, early contraception, and we talked about people going to get access to whatever they need. And one of the bills that you also have is the bill that would not allow pharmacists who might decide that they don't want you to have contraception to make that decision. And so there are many subtexts that have not been covered, but certainly we want you all to be assured that as we look at women and the full range of reproductive health options, we are really looking at the full range of that health care. And it is really extremely important to not only have you representing the advocates and women and Sabrina, that generation that tweets and so on, and certainly the voice of our physicians who ultimately are charged with that care. So before I let them go, Senator, I wanted to ask you if you had any comment.
I'll make a very quick comment, and thank you. I apologize for not being able to have been here. This is a truly busy day, but I thought that it was really important that I at least come and thank you, number one, for coming to testify, coming to help us to stay current with what is happening legislatively across the country. Those of us who are active in some of our national organizations are hearing these things, and it's amazing how little support we're getting for the rollback in a lot of the rights that we're experiencing. But I want to continue to thank you for your advocacy and your continuing to give us the intelligence necessary to make the best possible laws for the state of New York. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. Now we have our next panel, and what I'm going to do, because we are running out of time, is ask for Kelly Owens of our YWCAs of the Northeast. Thank you, Kelly. To be joined by Sherry Tomasky of the American Cancer Society. To be joined by Jasmine Burnett.
Actually, they're in the panel after us.
Well, actually, I know.
So there's a short time frame.
I know, but I know that we, so, yes, because we're going to talk about coverage, and we're going to talk about screenings, and we're going to talk about the health benefit exchange, because if we do all this right, then everything works. So,
Good luck with that.
yes, good luck.
That's optimistic.
Yes, right. And we have Farah. Is Farah Foreman here? Come on up. Thank you. We are going to try and do great things here in a short period of time. So we have Kelly, we have Sherry, Jasmine, and where's Erin? Okay, and Sarah. Okay. So Kelly, I believe you are on you have to leave soon, right?
No, I'm good, but I'll be quick.
Okay. Is there somebody who has this panel is it you? Okay.
Do you want her to go first?
No. Was everybody good? Okay, because we're scheduled to be here till about 1. So I think if everyone can. What's that? Okay. All right. Kelly?
Okay. Thank you very much for bringing together all these wonderful women. It's certainly a different picture than we saw when Washington talked about women's health a couple of months ago, so thank you very much.
There's no where are the women questions here.
Just to give you a little brief explanation of who the YWCA is and why we're concerned about women's health is we are the oldest and largest women's membership movement in the world. We're 150 years old. We're in 125 countries here in the United States. We serve about 2 million women, and 10% of those women are served here in the state of New York at about 250,000 women. Women come to us at all stages of their life. They come to us to be community leaders, but they also come to us in times of crisis. We are the largest provider of domestic violence services and sexual assault services across the country. So women's health has always been a major part of our mission. Our mission is the elimination of racism and the empowerment of women. In order to be a YWCA, you have to have programs. In order to put our sign on your building, you have to run those programs. We're very proud of the fact that we are among the first in a lot of areas. We've been part of the we're not only a social services agency, we are a social movement. And we're very proud of our long history in regards to that. I will be brief. To speak specifically about women's health, like many of the speakers before us, we are deeply disturbed with the attitude around women's health in this country. We are not only disturbed, but we are angry. We are angry that we are still having these conversations about women's health and access to services. We are equally concerned about the impact on low-income, underinsured, and uninsured women in this country and in this state. And we are angry about the fact that some people continue to put politics above the lives of women and force their religious beliefs on all women. We're very concerned. I'm going to speak specifically to access to breast and cervical cancer screening. It remains a major program for us at the YWCA. We screen probably over 10,000 women across the state of New York for breast and cervical cancer. Those are women who live with us. They live in our shelters, they live in our housing, and they come to us through our daycare centers, so we are a point of access. I'm going to share with you my own personal story around screening. I was faced not too long ago with the fact that my employer didn't have health care coverage, and my Cobra was running out. At the same time, I found a lump in my breast. I'm a single mom with 2 kids, and I very seldom share personal stories when trying to make a point, but I think this illustrates very well. I'm not low income, but I'm one of those women who was in that little crack that said, do I do what I need to do for my health, or do I make the decision to spend my money in another place? Women shouldn't have to be making those decisions. We shouldn't be making the decision about whether or not I get screened because I can't afford it. So I just wanted to share that personal story. And still, I think back when I would just walk and think, if I just break my leg, I'm done. I'm financially ruined. Specifically about Senate Bill S. 841 and 6603, it goes a long way to alleviate those concerns by eliminating the copays for most screenings, and women won't have to make those terrible choices about their health or whether or not they pay their electric bill. The YWCA would be remiss if we didn't talk about the racial disparities within the healthcare system. In a study by the American Cancer Society, we know that the facts are that minority women are less likely to have a yearly mammogram. We know that among women with early breast cancer, ethnic and racial minorities are 20 to 50% less to receive appropriate treatment. We also know that African American women are less likely to receive standard treatment for cancer even after adjusting for socioeconomic status. Minority women are more likely to delay follow-up and treatment care, resulting in poorer outcomes. African American women experience a 5-year survival rate of 76% after breast cancer, and white women at 90% due to lack of early detection. The YWCA believes that access to affordable screening will do a lot to prevent worse situations for women of color as well. As a society, we really have to address those problems. These bills go a little bit in ways to do that. We believe there are bigger issues that need to be discussed when it comes to access to affordable health care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Sherry, we'll let you. Oh, I'm sorry. We have been joined by Senator Kevin Parker, who has himself announced himself as an honorary woman on some occasions, but certainly a great supporter of women and women's health and issues. So thank you for joining us, Senator. Sherry.
Thank you. I'm Sherry Tomasky. I'm from the American Cancer Society. I'm quite pleased to be here today, and I specifically wanted to address comments towards the legislation that would eliminate deductibles and co-payments for cancer screening on behalf of our organization. And again, my comments I think will be relatively brief, but this is a very important piece of legislation that the Cancer Society strongly supports, and we believe the evidence is robust to justify legislation like this. In the 2010 federal health reform law, the provisions of that law do at some point in time eliminate cost sharing for preventative cancer screening services, and those provisions are phased in over time through a variety of complicated rules. And we know that the law put those provisions into effect immediately within 6 months for Medicare, and in New York, Medicaid already recognized that copays and cost sharing present a barrier to cancer screening and had eliminated those for their clients. So the federal health reform law sort of fills in the gap for the private insurance market. And, however, because it's phased in over time, there's a large number of people in New York that wouldn't see that benefit for quite a long time. And that's why we feel this legislation is so important, because it essentially speeds up the clock on that provision of the federal health reform law for people that have state-mandated insurance in New York. And one of the reasons that one of the many reasons we feel this is important is because, as I said before, the evidence is very strong in support of the fact that women do not access cancer screening services as often when they have cost sharing as those that do not. And so we know that the mammography rate, for example, is about 10% lower among people that have copays, as little as $15 or $20. It doesn't take a lot of money to present a barrier for that type of cancer screening. And we know that because of cervical cytology screening is probably on the least expensive end of the cancer screening spectrum, the uptake rates are relatively high even when there is a copay in place. For mammography, you do see, because the cost is a little bit greater, you see the uptake rates go down when cost is a factor. But I also want to point out another very important cancer screening that I'm not clear is addressed in this legislation that we think should be, and that is for colon cancer. Colon cancer presents, probably the biggest colon cancer screening presents a very big financial barrier for people that need to be screened. And we think that this legislation ought to model the federal law in that it also eliminates cost sharing for people seeking colon cancer screening that would apply, of course, to both men and women. The magical thing about colon cancer screening is that it's one of the few ways in which we can prevent a cancer from starting before it even happens. We cannot prevent a breast cancer with a mammography. We can only find it early and treat it more effectively. You can prevent the onset of a colon cancer with appropriate screening technologies, colonoscopy being the gold standard. And so the prevention of a colon cancer, I think, is something that we ought to strive for, and in order to really increase the screening rates, eliminating that cost sharing could be very important, because colonoscopy tends to be on the upper end of cost for the screening tests. The out-of-pocket share could also be relatively high for people that have maybe a 20% cost-sharing model for that type of test. So we'd like to encourage colonoscopy to be part of this legislation, and we strongly support this. We think that it's very important for New Yorkers to see the rates of cancer screening go up, which is the intent of the federal health reform law. It's certainly the intent of the state legislature and the sponsors and the supporters of this piece of legislation. And so we think that that would really maximize the effectiveness of what this bill can do. So thanks for the chance to weigh in on this. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tomasky. we have been joined by another great supporter of women, Senator Jose Peralta. Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask my next panelist to come up and join this panel as well, because we're talking about insurance, we're talking about coverage, and so it seems that it could be an inclusive conversation. So joining us is Jasmine Burnett, Raising Women's Voices, and Erin Hoven of the Children's Defense Fund. Thank you so much. This has been a really, I think, wide-ranging but very illuminating conversation that we've been able to have. And unfortunately, we only have 2 hours for this, and clearly we have issues that we could talk about at length. And just to your point, Mr. Mansky, we certainly don't want to jeopardize anyone in terms of their coverage and possibilities of avoiding cancer. And certainly I think colonoscopy would be something we would consider. And obviously, because the focus was specifically on women's issues, we talked about the legislation that dealt with the mammographies and cervical cancers. But thank you for bringing that point up. Jasmine, we had you, yes, we had you listed Raising Women's Voices, and you were here at the table, so I didn't know if you wanted to.
I'm Jasmine.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jasmine. Okay. You're Erin. You're Farrah. Okay, sorry. Okay. Where's Farrah's nameplate? Do you not know? Okay, Farrah, were you planning to? Okay, all righty. So that's okay. So now we're fine. Thank you, Liz.
Yes.
All right. So, Jasmine, I would love for you to, we are going to start talking about the health benefit exchange as we talk about the various screenings and what's available and what isn't. And, you know, we had an awfully hard time here trying to get people to consider the health exchange. And ultimately, as you know, the governor issued an executive order because, again, and, you know, we're here talking because there's a lot of things that we cannot get done. And part of bringing that out is having hearings like this so that people know what we're talking about, what we're up against, and really, you know, help to enlighten people so that they can become part of the push to get things done. We had to get some health exchange legislation going, and so the governor's executive order has now put pieces in place. What I'd like for us to talk about is, in terms of women, access, why is it important? What do we have to do to make sure that we protect those things that are very important so that, again, we're not just, you know, kind of struggling behind the 8 ball. So if you would, Jasmine, I open it to you.
Thank you so much. So again, my name is Jasmine Burnett, and my role at Raising Women's Voices is centered around speaking to women of color at grassroots organizations, churches, wherever I can find women of color about what this health exchange is going to mean for them, and I speak for us and our families. So we look at the specific health disparity of infant and maternal mortality and morbidity and how to address that as a health disparity through the New York State Health Exchange. And we found that that is a way for women to really hold on to the information in terms of seeing how it will benefit their families directly and understanding that that is an issue that addresses both them and their families throughout the life course. So I'm going to talk to you today about what we're doing in terms of how we're advocating for this at Raising Women's Voices. So let's start with the biggest problem that women are facing, and that's cost. In 2010, 45 million women across the United States reported that because of cost, they didn't fill a prescription, they skipped a recommended test or follow-up treatment, they did not go to a doctor when they had a medical problem, and they did not see a specialist when it was needed. And this is even true for women who actually have health insurance, but they can't afford to use it, so because the deductibles or the co-pays are too high. So the challenges are just a bit insurmountable for women. We have some stories that we've done. We did a series of listening sessions when we first took on this cause around health reform. And I'm just going to use the story of a 40-year-old woman who, African-American woman, 2 daughters. She works in the office right next to ours, breast cancer survivor. She used to quote, "I've lived and worked in this country my entire life. Why don't I have health insurance when I need it?" She was kicked off when she presented for breast cancer. So this is also people who get dropped because, their coverage, they don't want to get the insurance companies don't want to cover them, or the economy is just bad. So the Affordable Care Act is great in that it will help you no matter what your age or income. So it helps women and families who are uninsured but can't afford health care. It has help for women and families who are who have insurance that doesn't cover what they need or it's too expensive. And it covers, as I said, the lifespan. So what we need to know is that there is no longer any gender rating in the Affordable Care Act, which means that being a woman is no longer a pre-existing condition for health care coverage. Isn't that a great idea?
Big victory.
Exactly. And we also found out that insurance had coverage limits that left women on the hook for devastating medical expenses that they could not afford. And also, we also need women to know that they are guaranteed maternity coverage and contraceptive coverage without any extra cost, and other benefits for older women like mammograms without copay, so it closes the donut hole so they don't fall through the cracks in terms of receiving the care that they need. We're going to talk about prevention. And just to kind of back up a little bit, Raising Women's Voices is doing a campaign called Countdown to Coverage, and we're counting down the coverage that women will receive as of August 1st. So this is a presentation that centers around that. So all new insurance plans in the exchange are required to cover key preventive care services without charging us co-pays or deductibles. Examples of the women's services already included are mammograms, pap smears, anemia, and hepatitis B screenings for pregnant women. Also, blood pressure, diabetes, and cholesterol testing, counseling about quitting smoking, losing weight, choosing healthy foods, treating depression, and reducing alcohol use. So what this means for New York women is an estimated 1.3 million New York women will have gained coverage for these services, which is very exciting for us. And how we're looking at this in terms of how it addresses racial and gender disparities is some of the new preventative services that will be covered, as I told you, as of August 1st, which is comprehensive contraceptive care, the annual Well Woman's Care Exam, screening for sexually transmitted diseases, breastfeeding counseling and support, screening for gestational diabetes, again, looking at the mortality, the maternal mortality piece of that, and most importantly, screening and counseling for intimate partner violence, which is something that I'm not certain most insurance companies either cover or even acknowledge in their plans. So right now, we are counting down to the new preventive health care services that women will be getting as of August 1st. This applies to all new insurance plans and to existing plans when enough changes are made to them to qualify them as new. You've probably heard a lot about the contraceptive coverage requirement that came through HHS this past summer. And it's great that women have access to birth control. As a woman of reproductive age, that's amazing. And not have to pay for the out-of-pocket costs for that. This coverage for reproductive and contraceptive services also includes birth control pills, but also IUDs and tubal ligations, which are really cost prohibitive for women who want that service. And what we know is that when women can plan and space their pregnancies, they have healthier babies and healthier lives. And somehow that big issue gets lost in all of the controversy around the Affordable Care Act. And so it's worth remembering when we know that for every $1 spent on contraceptive services, we save $4 on pregnancy care for women. So this makes good sense for both the nation's pocketbooks and the women's pocketbooks. See, we can share it. We can share power here. Keeping our kids healthy. So what is covered for children? Well baby visits, immunizations, screenings for autism and lead exposure, vision and hearing tests, obesity screening, drug and alcohol assessments for adolescents, which is also something that people don't talk about much. You can go through the entire list on www.healthcare.gov to find the full list. We're also providing protection. Protection is also very important for women. So sometimes the insurance companies have unfair company practices. So through this campaign, insurers cannot cancel your policy if you get sick or make a mistake in your insurance application. Insurers cannot set lifetime dollar limits on the amount of the medical care that they will cover, and there will be no annual limits starting in 2014. And already 2.5 million New York women are protected under this. There's no coverage for kids, no coverage denials for kids with pre-existing conditions. We have a nurse in our office building. Her name is Nurse Abby. Her grandniece was born with hearing loss. Do you know that the family's health insurer denied coverage for treatment, calling it a pre-existing condition?
Oh,
this baby was only 1 month old. She was born with this condition. Yes, I know, it's insane. So we also want to ensure that more of your health premium dollars actually go to medical care. That makes sense. So insurance companies now have to give rebates to consumers if they don't spend at least 80% of the premium dollars they collect on actually providing medical care. They will be forced to spend less on CEO salaries, marketing, and overhead. And they have to make this information public. We have to know about it so that we can make better insurance choices. And under this, an estimated 4.6 million New Yorkers have already received protection under this provision. And it also provides peace of mind for mothers. So adult children can stay on their family's health insurance plans up to the age of 26. The young adults do not have to live at home, which is great. They can also be married and still covered under their family's plan and be a dependent for tax purposes. So this is very important for young women in reproductive age, and already with this benefit, 150,000 New York adults have benefited. We also know that in New York State, currently the health insurance, a child can stay on a family's health insurance plan up to the age of 29, but that was done through the COBRA policies, which is actually a more expensive plan for both the family and the employer and the individual. So it's very important that we have this condition in the health exchange, although we already have that coverage. So looking ahead to 2014, maternity care must be covered. No charging women more for men, more than you charge men for it's gender rating, it's unfair, it's unequal. And our Countdown to Coverage campaign is already underway, and we're very excited to share this with you. So what we're going to do, what it means for us in New York State is new state insurance exchanges are due to open in January 2014. Uninsured and moderate income individuals and families can shop for private insurance made affordable by federal subsidies, and more low-income people will be eligible for Medicaid coverage, which my colleague Erin is going to speak to you more about. And we're going to talk about the New York State Health Exchange. So, of course, as you said, Senator Stewart-Cousins, it was passed by an executive order, yay, Governor Cuomo. It's expected to provide affordable health insurance to more than 1 million uninsured New Yorkers. And we have to really be at the forefront of the decisions that need to be made, and we're going to make sure that women of color are at the table. And that's what I have to present to you on Countdown to Coverage and what Raising Women's Voices is doing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jasmine.
You're welcome.
And Erin, you get the last presentation on the panel, and then we get to ask our questions. Thank you.
My name is Erin Hoban, and I work for the Children's Defense Fund. So we try to make sure that every child in New York has access to affordable and quality health care so that they can get a healthy start in life. So for us, the Affordable Care Act is hugely beneficial for children. So already in New York State, as Jasmine mentioned, we do have the dependent coverage. We have a prohibition on lifetime limits, the Medicaid expansion, which was just happened last fall, the expansion of preventive services without cost sharing, school-based health centers, maintenance of effort, and the pre-existing conditions, which have all been affected by the ACA. So dependent coverage, adults up to age 26 can be on their parents' insurance, which is hugely important right now with kids graduating college and not able to access jobs. If they do access jobs, a lot of times they don't have employer-based coverage. So it's nice to say, hey mom, hey dad, can I get back on your plan? And thus far, this has benefited over 150,000 people in New York. We also have the prohibition on lifetime limits. So the law bans insurance companies from imposing lifetime limits on coverage, and as a result, 1,609,000 children have benefited from this. So almost 2 million children. And then, again, like Jasmine said, it restricts the use of annual limits and bans them entirely starting in 2014. The Medicaid expansion. So under the Affordable Care Act, people are going to be able to access Medicaid between or up to 138% of the federal poverty level. So New York, being ahead of the game, decided to go ahead and start that in November. And this will be helpful for families that had stair-step eligibility before, where one child was on CHIP, one child was on Medicaid based only on their age. So now in a family, all children are going to be on the same plan. So everyone's going to be on Medicaid, which means you can take your kids to the same doctor. You don't have to take one to one doctor, another one to a different one. And an estimated 70,000 children are going to enroll onto Medicaid because of this provision. The expansion of preventive services without cost sharing. The ACA requires many insurance plans to provide coverage for and eliminate cost sharing on certain preventive measures. And I remember Sherry was talking about how this is prohibitive, and it's also prohibitive for children. You know, if a mom sees that she has to pay $10 or $15 for her child to get preventive care, it's not something that they necessarily need. They're not going to go and do it. And already almost 1 million children have benefited from this. So just over 800,000 children in New York have benefited from this provision. School-based health centers. These are really important in New York, especially for adolescents. We're finding that a lot of adolescents aren't necessarily accessing care. You know, they're very nervous because they want to talk to their doctor about sexual intercourse, and they don't feel comfortable doing that, thinking that their parents are going to know. So the school-based centers, in their school, they can just go to somebody, and it's all confidential. And the ACA has already given $12 million to clinics in New York State for this. The maintenance of effort. Under the ACA, states are not allowed to cut back their Medicaid and CHIP programs beyond the levels they were when the law was signed. So on March 23rd, 2010, however, New York was, they can't reduce that at all. And the eligibility levels have to stay for children in Medicaid and CHIP through September 30th, 2019. And if a state does violate this, they are at risk of losing all their federal matching funds. So they have to abide by it. And the states will also are insured to receive 2 more years of CHIP funding. For pre-existing conditions, again, insurance companies can no longer deny somebody coverage for a pre-existing condition. And in New York, 260,700 children have benefited from this. So that's what we've already got in New York. And there's a lot of things still coming down, just why we have to make sure that this stays. Children are going to be mandated to have health insurance. There's going to be foster care children are going to be able to have more coverage. There's going to be child-specific services. There's the creation of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. It's going to be more affordable. There's a childhood obesity demonstration project. There's a child-only coverage option in the exchange. And then there's going to be an oral health benefit. So for foster care children, in 1999, New York expanded Medicaid to allow them to stay on until the age of 21. Under the ACA, they can stay on until the age of 26, which is excellent because foster care children are, you know, more at risk for mental health problems, more at risk for substance abuse problems, and they need that assistance. Child-specific services. All health plans in the exchange are going to be required to have an essential health benefit package. And while we haven't defined this, there are 10 items that the ACA requires each benefit package to have. And one of those is very specific preventive care for children. The creation of the Center for Medicaid and Medicaid Innovation, they're going to start looking into methods which are expected to improve the quality of care and reduce the rate of growth in healthcare costs for Medicare, Medicaid, and CHIP. So that's something that the ACA has created a provision for. And more affordability. And we all know that the exchange and all the health plans there are going to be more affordable. So in 2014, the law will provide refundable and advanceable premium credits. Families with incomes between 133 and 400% of the federal poverty level will be eligible, and they'll all be accessible on the exchange. The Childhood Obesity Demonstration Project. The ACA gave $25 million to the Centers for Disease Control to look into why children are obese and what can we do to prevent this, to help them prevent chronic disease. And they're focusing on children ages 2 to 12 that are already enrolled in CHIP. The child-only coverage option. This is really important because we're going to have mixed households. So you're going to have a child that's living with their grandparents, And for the purposes of the ACA, they're not going to be a tax household. So for this, if somebody wants to enroll their child in, they can go onto the exchange and they're able to buy just a child-only coverage. And then lastly, oral health. The ACA creates an oral health prevention campaign, dental caries disease management, school-based dental sealant programs, and cooperative agreements to improve infrastructure and surveillance systems. So that's what I have on what's happening with the ACA and children.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to open the floor for questions from my colleagues. Questions?
Well, I think it's a comment across the board on all the things you said. So, Kelly, thank you for telling us your personal story, but I think it actually highlights the issues for women, whether, as you described, they are not poor, they are poor, they are of color, they are dealing with cancer or even just basic preventive care for themselves and their children, that we have a system in the state that so far isn't working. Now, we have an opportunity, and I appreciate Jasmine and Aaron's testifying to what exists because of the National Health Care Act or what will exist by 2014. It goes a long way to addressing many of the issues we've highlighted. But it also, for me as a legislator who I think even a week or two ago was voting against a bill to give a local option to shift to high deductible savings plan type of health insurance, which that was sort of the model of the Bush administration, to be partisan for a moment, that didn't work, that basically was insurance which is really great if you're not sick and are rich, but actually is lousy insurance when you actually are sick or aren't rich and can't pay for things. So people like to criticize the plan that was passed in Washington that we're trying to move into and hope it's still there by 2014. But at the same time, here in New York State, on the Senate, we have actually colleagues who are trying to move the models we already know are failed models and have led to all the types of examples that you gave here today. And again, also appreciate Senator Stewart-Cousins bringing us all together around women's health, because it really does highlight we are treated differently.
Yes.
We are treated differently by insurance companies. We are treated differently by employers. I mean, Kelly, you and I have worked on equal pay for women. Well, if we had pay equity, probably more women would find themselves in jobs that actually paid a living wage and had health insurance, as opposed to a disproportionate number of women living at much lower income rates without access to health benefits at all. So I just wanted to thank you all, because I thought you each told your own piece of the story, but it's one consistent story.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Gruber. Thompson.
Again, just briefly, because I know time is of the essence, but again, a lot of times people think that everything we do here comes out of our heads, and it's absolutely so far from the truth. But it comes out of these opportunities that you provide to help us to understand the nuances of what the picture really looks like. We like to believe that the state of New York is at the forefront of most issues, but when it comes to the issues of women's health, we're just as much in the dark as many other states. Maybe not as far as some, but they're pre-dark. We have the need for all of the kind of support and help that you can continue to give as advocates to make sure that the word not only goes out to those who are here today, those who've been in and out during the course of the day, but also to those who perhaps you think are not listening or may not think that this is a major issue. But anytime the issues are issues of women, then they're also family issues as well. And so people who might not be as sympathetic to women's issues certainly should be sympathetic to children's issues. There must be some caveat in there that will address and catch their attention. So we need you to help us to be creative about how do we make sure that as we put this together, that people who are not at present advocates with us become more of an advocate. because this is really about how do we ensure good health practices for women. And if it means just being able to identify the economics of it, you know, sometimes men understand that issue better than any other. So when we can talk about how prevention makes a tremendous difference in terms of what care really costs, then that can make a difference. I know that culturally, many times you'll see that women will put their health issues at the bottom of the list. When they've got families and other considerations, theirs must be at the top. And to use the phrase that they use on the airlines, you know, help yourself first before you can help somebody else. And so I think that that's kind of the posture that we're trying to take, and we just appreciate you helping us to get there.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kowalski.
Yes, thank you, Senator Stewart.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having this forum, and I want to thank all the individuals that testified today. It's very important, as we all know, to hear from women advocate groups on women issues, because sometimes, especially on the other side of the aisle, they tend to forget. And we as Democrats want to remind everyone across the aisle that these are very important issues. So I thank you for today, for your testimony, and I also thank you for actually coming up to Albany and making this push. And this shouldn't be the last time that you do it. And I know that many of you come up constantly. I just bumped into another advocate coming here on my way here, and I talk to her constantly about reproductive issues that we've been facing and we've been trying to push on this side of the aisle. But I have a question in terms of maternity leave. I've been working closely with Assemblywoman Simotis, and we're looking to extend the amount of time a woman can take on maternity leave. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and what is your take on the extension of what currently exists now by law and what we're trying to extend it to. We want to extend it to a few more months. Yes, I want to be clear. We are looking to extend it a few more months unpaid.
Unpaid.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I was very excited about it until you said unpaid. I have to be quite honest. I'm not sure how we improve the conditions for a mother to be able to care for her child, although she may be off work, to be able to do so if she doesn't have the resources to be able to do that. So I'm just curious about, you know, if there are going to be social safety nets that then support these women. Will that be extended? What will that look like? And I would really like to see, as that develops, you know, who your partners are, who you're speaking with, where you're getting your information from that informs that policy. Because for me, you know, a woman has to be able to care for her child. And she needs the access to the resources to do so.
So the answer is an extension with
pay. Absolutely.
That would be a resounding yes.
A resounding yes.
Okay.
With health coverage, with pay, with, you know, protection for her job once she is able to re-enter the workforce, with her being able to pump at work. Those types of things would have to be included.
Okay.
I'm just going to do a promotion. We recently did another roundtable in this room around women and the workforce issues. Kelly was here for that. You unfortunately couldn't make it, which is okay. But we actually talked quite a bit about both the Paid Family Leave Act and the ability to redesign our workers' comp benefits in New York State to actually help ensure that women can get paid for paid family leave without being an excessive new cost to the employers in the state, because we need to balance the reality of businesses in trouble wanting to keep people employed and respecting the need for paid family leave for both having a newborn or other emergency needs in the family. And we also, in that hearing, discussed the importance of pregnancy accommodations in the workforce, which is also another bill I carry that I'd love to see passed in this chamber.
Okay.
So we can work together on this.
Well, I really want to thank all of you for being here and helping us to, again, make sure that people understand what the stakes are. People talk about the health exchange, and it's a few words, health exchange. What does that mean? So we have to take the time to get people who understand not only what these things mean, but the implications if we don't have them. And the reality is that your support, your voices, your insights, your intelligence on these matters help us to be effective advocates, not only for we who sit here, but for the millions and millions of women that we all represent. And obviously with the health exchange we are talking about, services and coverage that goes far beyond what women can claim, but certainly New Yorkers in general. So it sounds to me like what I'm hearing is that if we do what we're doing, if we are on the right track, there's not a lot of gaps. Nobody's sitting around saying, but we ought to do this and we ought to make sure that, because it sounds to me as though it's very, very comprehensive as it stands. So what we have to make sure is raise our voices to let people know that it's important that regardless of what happens, we stay the course in terms of making sure these important services are provided. So you have been extremely important in making that clear for us. I really want to thank all my colleagues for being here. Again, you heard what a busy day it is, and yet people wanted to be here because there's an interest and there's a need. I mean, healthcare and certainly women's health is not a partisan issue. Republican, independents, whatever political stripe, you will need health care. And so how we manage to make sure that from the cradle to the grave, you have access to quality, affordable care is really what we consider our charge. So I really, again, thank you. I thank my colleagues, and I thank the staff who have been so instrumental, all of you who have helped put this together, from my staff, Kate and John and Jim and Laura and all of our camera and crew. I really thank you because, again, we've had real-time streaming of important information that I know will benefit all of us. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.